A 99 DNA kit blew up my family. I learned my son isn't biologically mine, and the truth was worse than I imagined. The story starts the way too many messes do, with a well-meaning Christmas gift and a sale banner that made it impossible for my sister to resist. She bought ancestry kits for everyone, me, my wife Hannah, and our 8-year-old son Owen. Because our family group chat had been buzzing for months about origins and hand-me-down myths. My mother swore we had a sliver of Irish in us. My father claimed proudly that we were German stock, straight through. And my sister, newly obsessed with family trees, wanted to settle it with science. It was kitschy and fun. We spit in the tubes, shook the little blue caps, registered the codes on an app that wanted our birthdays, our heights, and whether cilantro tastes like soap. I didn't think about it, beyond a few dumb jokes about finding out I was secretly one Viking and petitioning for a horned helmet at Thanksgiving. Weeks passed, life filled in the gaps. I went to work, wrangled spreadsheets and clients, came home to homework, baths, bedtime, and the ritual of packing Owen's lunch the night before. Hannah and I were coming off a bad patch. Too many short tempers, not enough sleep. The slow erosion you get when two people operate like coworkers, covering different shifts of the same job. Nothing dramatic. Just tired. The results landed on a Thursday evening in February. My phone pinged as I was stirring pasta sauce and trying not to scorch it. I wiped my hands, thumbed open the app, and there it was. An explosion of colored bars and percentages. The full carnival of ancestry marketing. Northern European heavy, as expected. A surprise slice of Iberian that made me think of my grandmother's dark eyes. Science had come to confirm and then decorate the stories we already told. I scrolled to the DNA Relatives tab out of curiosity. My sister popped up right away. Full sibling. Good. On the next line, parent-child match. Owen. I felt something like relief. Why relief? I don't know. The human brain is stupid. Until I noticed the line was not there. I refreshed the screen, closed the app, opened it again. It said I had a handful of second and third cousin matches, but nowhere did it show the one person I expected to anchor the whole page. No parent-child match. Owen. I stared until the screen dimmed. It felt like a UI bug, a glitch in a service designed for cocktail party revelations, not the kind that could alter the course of a life. I checked again, this time tapping into the help section and reading. In that slow, dawning way people read terrible instructions, that immediate family matches are flagged automatically. If a parent or child who has tested is in the database, it appears. If it does not appear, the relationship is not there. I could hear the pot beginning to hiss. I turned the heat down low and called out to Hannah in the living room, where she and Owen were building a Lego police station that had taken over the coffee table all afternoon. "Did you get your results?" I asked, aiming for breezy. "Not yet," she said. "It says they're still processing. Why?" "What did you get?" I looked back at the app, at the empty space where my son's name should have been, and I said, "The linemen say when they're standing on the edge of a cliff and don't want to look down." Nothing interesting. Dinner happened. Bedtime happened. Hannah crashed early because she had a morning shift the next day. I sat on the couch with the TV on mute, my phone in my hand, and the app open to the same blank section, as if staring at the absence could make it rearrange into presence. At midnight, I opened my laptop and typed out a message to customer support that read like a prayer disguised as a bug report. I asked if there were delays in populating close matches. I asked if data sometimes took days to propagate. I asked if family members could choose to hide from the Relatives tab. I asked everything except the question I was truly asking. Is it possible my son isn't my biological child? I didn't sleep much. The reply landed at 4:39 a.m. Robotic, but clear. Matches populate as soon as results are processed. Close family cannot be hidden. If two tested individuals share a parent-child relationship, it will be indicated. I stared at that last line until the words blurred. At 6:20 a.m., when the house was quiet except for the coffee maker and the heater ticking on, I pulled the test box out of the drawer where we'd tossed the bits we didn't need. On the registration card, the alphanumeric codes were still there. I checked them against the app to make sure I hadn't mixed something up, that I hadn't somehow registered Owen's tube under a different account, or bungled a digit. They matched. I set the card down and stood very still, like a person trying to keep a stack of plates from falling by refusing to breathe. When Hannah came into the kitchen, hair swept into the quick ponytail she wears on early mornings, I watched her pour coffee and felt like I had stumbled into someone else's house. I didn't say anything then. I told myself I had to be careful. I told myself there could be explanations. I told myself my entire reality did not pivot on an app designed to sell holiday bundles. But I also printed out a paternity test form on my lunch break and stuffed it into my work bag like contraband. 2 days later, when Owen and I were in the car on our way to the hardware store because a 12-cent screw had gone missing from an important toy, I asked him, casually, if he liked doing science experiments. He said yes, obviously, because what 8-year-old says no to a lab coat fantasy? We stopped at a clinic that does walk-in testing. I told him we were doing a fun cheek swab for a project. He obliged, giggling at the cotton swab and asking if he could see under the microscope later. I did mine too, hands shaking so much the nurse looked at me twice. The results took a week. An email landed with a subject line that might as well have been a dagger. I didn't open it at my desk. I went to my car, put the seat all the way back, and read the PDF on my phone like I was alone in a bunker. Probability of paternity, 0. E0. My body did not register the words at first. The human mind preserves you in small ways, even while it breaks you in large ones. I read it again. The statistic hulked on the page. Impersonal and clean. 0. Not a chance. Not, we found a rare mutation. Please retest. Not, inconclusive. 0. The world did not tilt. It stopped. Cars drove by normally. The sky stayed the color it had been. Somewhere, a man in the next row laughed into his headset about something that did not matter to me. I sat up slowly, put my hands on the steering wheel, and breathed until I remembered how. I texted Hannah, "Can you come home after your shift instead of stopping at your mom's? I need to talk." She replied with a thumbs up. A small digital agreement to attend the collapse of a life. I did not work the rest of the afternoon. I stared at my screen and saw nothing. I made it home at 5 and folded laundry into perfect rectangles, because if my hands were busy, the rest of me wouldn't go in pieces. When she walked in at 6:30, she looked tired and a little annoyed, the way you look when your partner sends a need-to-talk text on a day that already required all your stamina. "What's up?" she asked, dropping her bag and kicking off her shoes. I handed her the envelope from the clinic. I watched her eyes as she scanned. The first few seconds registered confusion, then comprehension, then something else. A flash of such raw fear that it almost made me step forward out of habit to comfort her. She sat down without looking at me. She put the paper on the table very carefully and folded her hands on top of it, like she was about to pray. "Is this a joke?" she asked finally, voice small. "No," I said. "It's not a joke." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, there were tears, but not the kind that come after the blow, the kind that come before, when a person sees the hammer in the air and knows there's no way to duck. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you known?" She shook her head. "I thought..." She swallowed. I wasn't sure. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was opposite her, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles hurt. "Who?" I asked, surprised at how steady my voice was. The sound of a man trying to keep a room upright by speaking quietly to it. She didn't answer. She stared at the paper like it might rearrange its numbers into mercy. "Who?" I said again. "A coworker," she said finally, so softly I almost didn't hear it. "A long time ago." She told me pieces of a story I did not recognize as mine. A rough patch in our second year of marriage when we were both working too much and talking too little. Drinks after work that turned into a thing that shouldn't have but did. A mistake, she called it, more than once, as if changing the word could dull its edge. She said she thought I was Owen's father. She said she did the math and believed the timing favored us. She said she buried it because she wanted our life more than she wanted to know whether it was built over a crack. "Does he know?" I asked. "The coworker." She shook her head. "No, we didn't. It was only a few times. He moved." It wasn't relief that washed over me. It was something colder. The idea that this fork in the road happened in the past, that every day since had been a step down a path I did not know was not mine, made me feel like I had fallen into a hole in my own floor. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, and even in the moment, I knew the question was selfish and also the only one that mattered. "Why didn't you tell me when you were pregnant? Why didn't we test then?" "Because I wanted you," she said, and the simplicity of it stung more than any elaborate excuse could have. I wanted us. I was scared to break it. We sat in a silence, that was not really silence. My head filled with the tiny memories that make fatherhood what it is. The smell of Owen's hair after a bath, teaching him to tie his shoes. The way he pressed his face into my neck when he was 3 and afraid of thunder. The Lego police station half built on our coffee table, waiting for its roof. Biology had just bisected my life into before and after, but fatherhood did not feel like it had moved an inch. He was my son. He had my rhythms because he learned them from me. He had Hannah's eyes because she gave them to him. He was ours, and somehow also not mine at all. "I need to think," I said finally, and went to the bedroom because there are conversations you cannot finish in a kitchen, even if you started your marriage there. That night I slept in the guest room. I lay on the too-firm mattress, staring at the ceiling, and thought of all the times men find out their children aren't theirs and leave scorched earth behind. I imagined packing a bag and a suitcase and the Lego instruction booklet and walking out and never looking back. The idea felt like trying on clothes that did not fit my body. I had a right to rage. I had a right to leave. I also had a boy who would wake up in the morning and want pancakes and would be devastated if I wasn't in the kitchen flipping them badly. At 3:11 a.m., I got up and went to Owen's room. He was a starfish in his bed, blankets kicked off, mouth open in the deep sleep of the entirely innocent. I stood in the doorway and had the clearest thought I've had in months. I will not let a PDF tell me who I am to this kid. I went back to the guest room and, for the first time since the email, slept. The next week was a grid of crises, each square demanding attention. There was the logistical crisis, what to do about school pickups, dinners, bedtimes, the texture of a life that had to remain intact for a child who hadn't asked for any of this. There was the relational crisis, how to speak to Hannah, how to be in the same room without the word coworker floating above our heads like a neon sign. There was the internal crisis, what to do with a story about yourself that is no longer true. We decided, in the quiet voice of people negotiating on ice, that we would not say anything to Owen. Not yet. Not until we had options instead of questions. We saw a counselor. We sat on a couch and spoke in turns, like the worst kind of theater, and told the story to a stranger who nodded and asked smart questions and did not pretend to be surprised. She said things about betrayal and repair and atonement and trust, as if these were skills you could relearn, like piano. I listened politely and wanted to ask if she had ever seen a marriage come back from a paternity test with E0 on it. I did not ask. It felt cruel, even if I believed it. We made an appointment with a family lawyer because I am not foolish enough to rely solely on love in a crisis that will eventually require paperwork. The lawyer was brisk and kind in equal measure. She explained that in our state, paternity presumed within marriage is complicated, but not immutable. If I wanted to fight for rights as a legal father, there were paths. If I wanted to step back, there were also paths. Each path cost time, money, and something intangible I had not yet learned how to budget: pieces of dignity. I did not tell anyone for a week. I carried it alone because I could not yet imagine the shape of people's faces when they heard it. When I finally told my sister, it was at her kitchen table, the one with the burn mark from a too-hot casserole dish at Christmas. She stared at me, and then at her own hands on the table, as if she could read the story in the tendons. She asked me questions that were not designed to be answered, only to be put into the air so we could breathe around them. She did not say I should leave. She did not say I should forgive. She said only, "What do you want to do?" Which is the hardest question you can put to a person who has just lost the narrative. I did tell my parents separately, because that is how it has been since I was 10. My mother cried immediately, large, generous tears that made me want to fold her into mine. She said ugly things about Hannah that she half meant, and then took back because she loves Owen more than she hates anyone. My father went quiet, which is his instinct when the car starts skidding. He asked practical questions about money, custody, legal status. He did not say the thing I was afraid he would say, that he had always suspected. He did not say it because it was not true. No one suspected this. We were not that kind of family. We were this kind. I did not tell my friends for a while because the sentence, "My son is not biologically mine," felt like a party trick, not a thing you put on a bar table next to a basket of fries. When I finally told my closest friend, he swore loudly enough to get us both stared at and then said, "Okay, what do you need me to do?" I did not know. He paid the tab and drove me home and did not try to hug me at the door because he knows I hate that. Hannah told her mother and sister. Her mother called me and apologized with a fervor that made me think about what it costs a mother to say sorry to the person whose son calls her Nana. Her sister sent a text that was both defensive and tender, the awkward mix you get when blood loyalty and clear wrongdoing collide. Hannah and I were two people in a small boat in rough water. Some days we rowed in sync. Some days we hit each other with the oars. Some days we put the oars down and let the current drag us, because moving felt worse than being moved. We argued. Of course we did. We argued about the word mistake, which I could not tolerate, and she could not stop using because it was the only one that made her feel human and not monstrous. We argued about whether to tell Owen anything now, anything later, anything ever. We argued about whether I would meet the coworker. I did not want to. She did not know if she wanted me to. We argued about grief, which is insane and common. How much I was allowed. How much she was allowed. Whether what I was grieving was real if biology said it was not. We also sat on the floor and cried, without making words. Some nights we slept back to back in the same bed, not touching. Some nights I went to the guest room and closed the door and stared at the ceiling and pretended to be a man who had already made decisions. One afternoon, the Ancestry app pinged again. Hannah's results had finally processed. I didn't want to look. I did anyway. The DNA relatives page showed Owen in her list, flagged properly as child. It also showed a match for me as husband's brother, which is not a category, but the algorithm had made a guess based on our proximity in the family tree that would have been funny if the rest of the page hadn't been a heart monitor. There was no match to a second parent for Owen. Whoever he was, the coworker, the ghost had not tested or had not put his information public. He floated outside the edges of our digital tree like a missing limb. At school, Owen thrived because that is what he does. He wrote a report about oak trees that he read to us at dinner, proud, stumbling only once over a word he had practiced. He asked one night, idly, if any of our family ever lived in Spain, because he saw Iberian on my app and thought it sounded like a sword. We laughed and told him great something stories we were not sure of. The irony carved its initials in the table where we were eating. At some point, responsibility turned into routine. The scab forms whether you want it or not. I packed lunches. Hannah did the morning drop-offs. I took Owen to soccer on Saturdays and shouted myself hoarse on the sideline. Hannah stood next to me and we talked about shin guards and the coach's favorite drills and whether we could afford to add piano lessons. We had the kind of conversations that pretend the house is not on fire, and sometimes pretending actually lowers the temperature. Then Owen brought home a worksheet from school that asked him to fill out a family tree for a unit on ancestry. He sat at the table with a pencil and a frown, and asked me how to spell my father's full name. He asked Hannah what year Nana was born. He drew boxes and lines, neat for an 8-year-old, and put our names where they belonged, because that is what you do when boxes are provided. I watched him write Dad above my name, and the word hit me like a second, smaller, more precise hammer. Biology, paperwork, law. All of it matters, and yet none of it changes the fact that he is the person who says the word Dad and expects me to answer. It is both simple and impossible. We had a second counselor session with a different therapist, this one specializing in family systems because the first one made me feel like we were being graded on a rubric we had not seen. He said things I could hear. He told me my feelings could be real and also not require me to burn my life. He told Hannah that confession is step 1, and atonement is a process measured in acts, not apologies. He reframed the word mistake into a sentence I could stand. An act with consequences you did not wish for, and must now own without negotiation. He also said we should decide soon if we were going to tell Owen anything, and if so, what? The what matters. Tell it badly, and you hand a child a weapon, they will turn on themselves. We wrote drafts. Literal drafts, like speeches, because our brains needed to see words on paper to believe we could say them. We read them out loud to an empty room and erased whole paragraphs because they were about us, not about him. We settled on the smallest true thing we could say, that families are made in more than one way, and sometimes the person who raises you is not the person who shares your DNA, and that what makes a dad is the life you live together. Not yet, not now, but soon, when the right time offered itself, not as an ambush, but as a kindness. The right time did not offer itself. Something always does it for you. The coworker had a name. Of course he did. He existed in the world before this and after. I had simply avoided saying it out loud because the sound of it made me want to break dishes. He was a sales guy, younger than me by 2 years. One of those people who can talk a dead tree into pretending it's a forest. He'd left the company a long time ago to go sell something somewhere else. He was, as far as I was concerned, a ghost. He came back. Not to the company, but to the city. A LinkedIn update popped into Hannah's feed that she did not intend to see. New role, new firm, location tagged 5 miles from our house. She showed me the screen like it had bit her. We stared at his photo long enough to memorize the new lines in his face. "Do we tell him?" she asked, and I realized with a kind of dull, delayed shock that we had been ignoring half of the triangle because it was convenient to pretend the third angle did not exist. I did not want to tell him. I wanted him to be a rumor. I wanted him to move again. None of those options were morally defensible. He had a right to know not, because I wanted to share the burden, but because it was the right thing to do. We argued for 2 days about process. Email, call, in person, through a lawyer. We opted for a letter sent certified because I wanted a record of this step that did not depend on anyone's recall. We wrote it together, then apart, then together again. It said only the facts, that a test had shown I was not Owen's biological father, that the timing suggested he was, that we were not asking for anything, only informing, that we would welcome a conversation when and if he wanted one. We included our lawyer's contact at the bottom, not as a threat, but as a way to route this through a safer corridor. He responded. Of course he did. 2 days later, an email to the address we'd provided. It was short, almost stunned in tone. He didn't know. He had no idea. He wanted to talk. We met in a neutral place, a conference room at our lawyer's office, which felt theatrical and was maybe necessary. He walked in, and I understood immediately why Hannah had been drawn to him. He had that energy some people have of knowing how to fill a room with his voice and empty it of your doubts. He looked at me and I looked at him, and we both saw our own failures reflected, different and equal. Hannah spoke first because I asked her to. She apologized, again and differently. He listened, then asked to see a copy of the paternity results. I slid the folder across the table like a surrender in a war game. He read. He closed his eyes for a long time, then opened them and met mine, and said a sentence I had not expected to hear. "I'm sorry." We talked logistics because feelings could not yet be done without that scaffolding. He wanted a test that included him. Of course. We agreed. He wanted to meet Owen. That was a different continent of conversation. We said not yet. He did not press, to his credit. The test took 10 days. During those 10 days, I found a new edge in myself I didn't know I had. I did not hover over Owen because I refused to turn our house into a museum of a relationship. I did not sleep much either because a part of me was afraid the second test would come back with yet another twist, as if I were in a story that delighted in making fools of everyone. The result? 99. 99 probability. A number so absurdly certain that it felt like a judge's gavel. We sat with that certainty like a third person in the room. We looped back to the counselor. We crafted a plan that felt like a flow chart with too many boxes. We should call him by a name. But I will keep him the biological father here because it is the cleanest honesty I can offer, wanted to be involved. He said he wanted to do it right. He said he did not want to break a boy to fix a man's curiosity. I believed him and also did not trust him, which is its own kind of rational contradiction. The lawyer talked about rights and obligations. The words child support landed on the table and sat there like a heavy thing no one wanted to pick up. He said he would pay without court. He said we could draft an agreement. He said the money wasn't the point, which is what people say when they are trying to prove they are not villains in a play that encourages simple roles. We did not decide then. You cannot decide a boy's life in a room where the lights hum and the coffee is bad and everyone is pretending they are not measuring each other's worth in their heads. At home, Hannah and I played out 100 scenarios. Meet him early, meet him late, don't meet him at all. Let him linger on the edges as a name. A boy learns when he is 15 and angry. Let him sit in the front row of a small, careful life we keep steady enough that no one trips. None of them felt exactly right. because there is no exactly right here. There is a constellation of wrongs you try to arrange into the least harmful shape. The counselor, patient and maddening, said we should ask a different question. Not what was fair to the adults, but what would be least confusing to the child. If Owen is going to learn the truth as he will, either from us now or from a science project, or an uncle who drinks too much at a barbecue later, would we rather be the ones to give him a frame? We said yes. We knew the answer before he finished the question. The knowing and the doing were not the same thing. We told Owen on a Sunday afternoon. Not the whole story. The smallest true thing. We sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of clementines between us because food helps keep hands busy. I told him that families are made in many ways, that the person who raises you is your dad, and that sometimes your DNA comes from someone else who is also important, but in a different way. I said I am his dad, and will always be his dad. I said he might have questions we can answer now, and more we can answer later. He frowned, the deep 8-year-old frown of a mind sorting files. He asked if I was still going to take him to soccer. I said yes. He asked if Nana was still his Nana. Yes. He asked if he could have another Clementine. Yes. He did not ask if he was loved because he did not have to. He did ask one more thing as he got up to go build the roof on the Lego police station. So, do I have two dads now? We looked at each other over his head and said carefully, in a way, yes, and we will figure out together what that means. He nodded like a person who has been offered a new word he can put in his pocket for later and left the peels in a small orange pile. We set boundaries. We set schedules. We met the biological father in a park 2 weeks later, not because it was symbolic, but because it was neutral ground where a child can run if he needs to. Owen was polite in the way he is when we introduce him to adults he senses we have feelings about. They kicked a soccer ball. The man, there is no elegant pronoun here, was careful, which is all I could have asked. He did not cry. He did not make proclamations. He asked Owen about school, about science projects, about whether he liked tree houses. He did not try to ask for a name he had not earned. He did not call himself anything at all. He played. He deferred to me when the ball rolled under a bench, and Owen looked to see which man he should ask for help. He made himself smaller than he is, which, in that situation, is grace. Driving home, Owen said the thing I had been bracing for and did not know I was. He was nice. Then, "Are you mad?" I told him no, and I meant it in that moment, because anger is not an emotion you hand to a child expecting him to put it away neatly. I told him we would go slow. He said okay, and asked if we could get ice cream. We did. At bedtime, he asked if the man would come to a game. I said not yet. He said okay, and fell asleep with his head on my arm, like always. In the weeks that followed, we widened the circle in increments. A park again, an hour at the museum, a hot chocolate at a cafe where the foam mustache made everybody laugh. Hannah and I didn't attend every meeting together. Sometimes I took him, sometimes she did, because part of normalizing this strange geometry is letting the child see that life can proceed in multiple directions without always requiring a summit. Not everyone in our families approved. My father said adding this man to the periphery was inviting chaos. My mother worried about holidays like they were landmines. Hannah's sister thought the slow roll was cruel to everyone, and we should either rip the bandage off or not at all. Friends had opinions they shared like candy they'd been waiting to hand out. The counselor told us to ignore anyone not in the room when decisions were made. We tried. Hannah and I, in the meantime, lived in that maddening mix of repair and resentment. Some days we held hands washing dishes. Some days I could not look at her without seeing a paper with a number on it and a younger version of her in a dim bar. We fought and made up and fought again. We went to therapy and learned to say things like, "I hear you," without sarcasm. We developed tiny rituals of apology that were not apologies. Extra coffee left by a bed, a post-it note with a dumb drawing, a text in the middle of the day that said only, "Thinking of you, good." I do not know if we will make it. I wish I could write an ending where I tell you we did. Endings are for novels. Real life wings back and forth on a clothesline, and some days you hope the wind dies down. In court, there was no court. We avoided it. We drafted an agreement that acknowledged the biological truth, preserved my legal parentage, allowed for contact at our discretion, and defined support in a way that felt less like punishment and more like participation. It was ugly and beautiful in equal measure, because adulthood is, too. When I look at Owen now, I do the thing every parent does. I search for myself. It is both pettiness and poetry. I find it in places that are not genetic. The way he taps his fingers when he is thinking, the way he hates being late, the way he chooses the corner seat in a restaurant because it lets him see the room. Those are mine, because he watched me do them until they were his. He also has a stubborn leftward dribble that is probably no one's but his. I am writing this from the dining table with the burn mark. The Lego police station is finished and sits with an authority I envy. The ancestry kits are in a drawer. The app is deleted from my phone. The PDF exists and will always exist. It is not the only document that matters. The story people want is whether love outweighs blood. It isn't a scale. It's a geometry problem with too many points. Some days, the triangle holds. Some days, it doesn't. On the days it does, it is because we chose to keep the line straight and the angles honest. One more thing, because I think it matters. If you ever find yourself holding a paper like the one I held, and your first instinct is to burn your life down so no one has to see you in the light of that number, wait, eat something, sleep. Look at the person the paper is about. Ask yourself what you are to each other when you are not data. Then choose. Choose slowly if you can. Fast if you must. But choose the version of yourself you want that child to remember. I chose to stay a father. I don't know yet if I will stay a husband. I do know that a 99 gift taught me the cost of not knowing, and also the price of learning. Both are high. One is survivable.